You won't believe what started as an ordinary evening in my kitchen. I was simmering tomato sauce, barefoot on the tile floor, humming along to an old Whitney Houston song. The kitchen smelled like oregano and garlic, warm and comforting. But then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, it was my husband's friend Marcus. And the way he looked at me standing in that doorway changed everything. It wasn't about words. It was the silence. The look in his eyes. The kind that speaks louder than anything. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know where you're watching this from. Drop your city in the comments. I love knowing how far this story travels. So let me start from the beginning. It was a Thursday evening, late spring, one of those days that felt just on the edge of summer. The windows were cracked open to let the breeze in, and I had Sinatra playing low in the background. The pasta was boiling, the sauce was bubbling, and I had just finished setting the table. I was alone. My husband, Daniel, had called an hour earlier to say he'd be stuck at work late again. Some unexpected meeting with the boar, he'd said. I wasn't surprised. It had been happening more often lately. I didn't mind the quiet. At 62, I'd grown used to filling the silence with little routines. Cooking had become my meditation. That night, I wore my favorite navy blue house dress. The one with the thin straps and low neckline that always made me feel a little more like myself. My silver hair was tied up loosely and a few strands clung to the side of my cheek from the heat of the stove. The doorbell broke the rhythm. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I hesitated. When I opened it, Marcus stood there. Marcus, my husband's longtime friend, the one who always made me laugh at dinner parties, who helped Daniel fix the deck last summer, who always looked me in the eye just a second longer than most men did. "Hey," he said, running his hand through his short, dark blonde hair, looking slightly sheepish. "Daniel home?" I blinked. No, he's still at the office. Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He was holding a bottle of red wine. "He told me to drop this off. Said you both might like it with dinner." That was odd. Daniel didn't mention anything about wine. But I didn't question it. "Welcome in," I said, stepping aside. "It's just me tonight, but the sauce is hot and the pasta is almost done." He smiled and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the kitchen as he entered. "Smells incredible in here." I shrugged. "Old habits." He followed me in, setting the wine on the counter. I poured us both a glass, and before I knew it, he was leaning against the kitchen island, sipping and watching me stir the sauce. We made small talk, light things, his work, a funny story about his neighbor's cat. But there was something beneath it. I could feel it. The way his eyes lingered just a bit too long. The way his voice dropped when he asked how I was doing, really doing. It had been a long time since anyone asked me that like they meant it. "I'm okay," I said, then smiled as I turned back to the stove. You know, same old, same old. But I wasn't okay. Not really. Daniel had been distant, distracted. Our conversations were shorter. Our dinners quieter. I didn't even know if he noticed the new curtains I'd hung in the living room. I heard Marcus shift behind me. "You look tired," he said gently. That caught me off guard. "Tired?" I turned to him, laughing lightly. "Gee, thanks." He chuckled, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "No, I mean like you've been carrying too much." The words sat in the air, heavy and soft, all at once. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how to. The silence between us thickened. Then he reached forward slowly and tucked that loose strand of hair behind my ear. I froze. His fingers brushed my skin, warm and hesitant. My breath caught in my chest. His hand lingered a second too long. Our eyes locked. And that's when I saw it. That look. The one that said everything. That he noticed me. That he saw me. Not just as Daniel's wife or the woman making dinner, but as me. A woman who still longed to be seen. I took a small step back, breaking the moment. I wasn't sure what it meant or what I even wanted it to mean. But I knew something had shifted. I shook, checked the pasta. I murmured, my voice a little too shaky. He nodded, stepping away, running a hand down his face like he was grounding himself. "Right, yeah, sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to, you know." I stirred the pot, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? Was I reading too much into a look? But the silence that followed, thick with everything unspoken, told me I hadn't. We sat down at the table a few minutes later, pretending nothing had happened. We talked about the wine, the sauce, the weather, but underneath every glance, every brush of his fingers against mine when passing the bread, it all said more than words ever could. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this night wasn't over. Something had started. Something neither of us could name just yet. But it was there and it wasn't going away. After Marcus left that evening, I stood at the sink with my hands in soapy water, staring out the window into the dark yard. The crickets were singing, the garden lights glowing softly along the walkway, and everything looked normal, but I wasn't. There was a hum under my skin, a stirring I hadn't felt in years. Not guilt. No, not quite. But awareness. I was aware of myself. Aware of the way Marcus had looked at me, the way I felt seen, desired even. Daniel came home 2 hours later, briefcase in hand and phone still pressed to his ear. He kissed me on the cheek as he passed by and mouthed, "Sorry." I nodded and smiled just like I always did. We didn't talk much that night. He ate the leftover pasta in silence while scrolling through work emails. I watched him trying to remember when we stopped talking. Not about bills or the house or doctor appointments, but really talking. When had we started just coexisting in the same space? The next few days passed in a blur. I went about my routines. Grocery store on Friday, laundry on Saturday, coffee with Ava on Sunday. But I kept replaying that evening in my mind. Marcus's voice, his eyes, the brush of his fingers. Then Monday came. Daniel was out of town for a conference. He left early in the morning, suitcase in hand, pecked me on the forehead, and reminded me about the plumber schedule to come check the guest bathroom. I waved him off and went about my day. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch reading when I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. I assumed it was the plumber, but when I walked out to the front, it was Marcus stepping out of his truck. My heart jumped. He waved almost sheepishly, holding up a small box of tools. Daniel said, "You might need help with the leaky faucet. Thought I'd come by and have a look before the plumber overcharges you." I stared at him, then laughed. "That's very noble of you." He shrugged. I didn't have much going on. Figured I'd swing by. I should have said no, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in. The energy between us was different now, charged, like we were both pretending it was just a casual visit when we both knew better. He went straight to the bathroom, rolling up his sleeves and crouching down by the sink. I hovered nearby, arms crossed, pretending to check my phone. "You don't have to stand there," he said, glancing up at me with a smile. "I promise I won't break anything." "I know," I said, then caught myself smiling back. "It's just weird having you here while Daniel's gone." His smile faded a little, and he looked back down at the pipes. "Is it?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to. So I turned and walked to the kitchen, made us both a cup of tea. Old habits. When he finished, he joined me at the kitchen table, wiping his hands on a towel I'd handed him. "Fixed," he said, sipping from the cup. "Didn't even need the plumber." "Thank you," I said softly. "Really?" We sat in silence for a moment, the clock ticking loudly in the background. Then he said, "That night I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable." I looked at him, my stomach tightening. "No," I said. "Honestly, you didn't." His eyes searched mine. Because I meant what I said. "I do see you. I have for a long time. And I'm sorry if that's complicated." I looked away, my throat tightening. "It is complicated," I whispered. "But it's also kind." He reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. I didn't pull away. "I know I shouldn't feel this way," he said, a voice low. "You're not mine to look at like that, but I can't help it." I swallowed, heart pounding. "Marcus," I began, but I didn't know how to finish. He stood slowly, walking around the table, then paused beside me. Close but not touching. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," he said. I think you deserve to feel seen. Wanted." And just like that, I felt my defenses start to fall. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head. Just that, no pressure, no expectation. Then he whispered, "I'll see you around," and walked out the door. I sat there long after he left, tea cold in my hands, unsure of what had just begun, but certain that something had. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Not because the house was empty, but because my mind was loud. I'd go through the motions like always, watering the garden, folding Daniel's shirts, writing out the grocery list. But everything felt different now. as if I was looking at the world through a window that had just been wiped clean. I thought of Marcus more than I should have. The way he stood behind me in the kitchen, his words still echoing in my head. I think you deserve to feel seen, want it? I hadn't told anyone, not even Ava, and she was the one person I confided everything in. There was a part of me that wanted to protect whatever it was that had passed between us, not out of shame but out of something else, something tender, fragile. Daniel returned on Wednesday evening, suitcase in one hand, phone in the other. He kissed me lightly, commented on how nice the house smelled, and disappeared upstairs to unpack. We didn't speak much. Not about us, at least. That night in bed, I lay awake beside him, listening to the sound of his breathing, wondering when we'd become strangers sleeping side by side. I turned toward him, watching his profile in the dim light. I felt no resentment, just a deep, aching sadness I didn't know how to name. By Friday I caved. I texted Marcus. The faucet's still holding up. Thought you should know. He replied within seconds. Glad to hear it. I was thinking about you today. My breath caught reading those words. Simple, direct, no pretense. Want some tea? I typed before I could talk myself out of it. Always, he answered. He arrived just after dusk. I'd left the porch light on just like last time. There was no bottle of wine, no fake excuse, just Marcus standing there in jeans and a plain black shirt, hands in his pockets, eyes on me like I was the only thing that existed in that moment. I stepped aside, letting him in. We didn't go to the kitchen this time. We ended up in the living room, tea forgotten, the conversation deeper than usual. He sat on the edge of the couch while I curled up in the corner, legs tucked beneath me, a knit blanket draped loosely over my lap. The lamps cast a soft golden glow around us. He asked me questions no one had asked in years about my painting, something I hadn't done since my mother passed. About what music I listened to when I was alone, about who I used to be before I was someone's wife. I told him things I hadn't told Daniel in decades. I told him about the time I almost ran away to Paris after college. How I used to dream of writing a novel, even started one once. How I sometimes looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. And he listened. Really listened. Then gently he said, Do you ever think about what you need now? Not what Daniel needs or what the house needs, but what you need. I stared at him, my throat tightened. No, I whispered. I haven't thought about that in a long time. He moved closer, not quite touching me, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. I think about you more than I should, he said. But I can't pretend anymore. You matter to me not because of anything you do or say, just because you're you, and I see the way you've been carrying everything alone. The honesty in his voice broke something open in me. Not in a destructive way, but like a long-sealed door quietly unlocking. He reached for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. I leaned against him, letting my head rest on his shoulder. His arm wrapped around me, slow and careful, as if waiting for me to tell him it was okay. And in that stillness I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe, held, wanted, not as an obligation, not out of routine, but genuinely wholly wanted. We didn't kiss. We didn't cross that line. But that night something deeper happened. Something more intimate than I'd expected. He saw me and I let myself be seen. When he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He turned to face me, his hand brushing mine one last time. I'll wait, he said softly. As long as it takes. I'm not here to ruin anything. I just want you to know you're not invisible. And then he was gone. But the feeling he left behind stayed with me like a warm light quietly glowing in a room I thought had gone dark long ago. The morning after Marcus left, I woke before sunrise. The house was still bathed in a soft gray light, and for a moment I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, staring at nothing. Something had shifted in me. Not in a way that demanded drama or fireworks, but in a way that was deeply personal, quiet, unmistakable. Like waking from a long sleep and realizing you've been dreaming of someone else's life. Daniel stirred beside me, muttering something incoherent before turning over. I watched him for a moment. His face was peaceful in sleep, brow relaxed, mouth slightly open. I didn't feel anger or betrayal, just distance. Like we had slowly floated away from each other over the years, and never noticed until we were both out of reach. Later that afternoon he asked if I wanted to go out for dinner. Something we hadn't done in months. I agreed. Part of me hoped it would feel like something again. Then I'd feel a spark that his eyes would meet mine like they used to and see me. But all through dinner we talked about the same things. News, bills, the lawn needing mowing. His phone buzzed 3 times. He checked it twice. I stirred my pasta and smiled at the waitress when she complimented my earrings. On the drive home I stared out the window watching the soft blur of streetlights. My reflection stared back at me faintly in the glass and I thought, when did I stop expecting more? When we got home, Daniel went to his study to answer emails. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door quietly behind me. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I let my robe fall away and studied my body, not with shame or judgment, but with curiosity. My skin marked by time. My collarbones still elegant. My eyes older but wiser. I wasn't trying to look young again. I just wanted to see myself. And I did. The next morning I texted Marcus, "Are you free for a walk?" He replied almost instantly, "Always." We met at the trail behind the park. It was cool, the air thick with the smell of pine and wildflowers. Birds chirped overhead and the gravel crunched under our feet. We didn't say much at first, just walked side by side, letting the silence wrap around us like a blanket. There was no awkwardness, no need to fill the space with words. Eventually, I stopped near a bench and sat. Marcus followed, watching me carefully like he could tell something was different. "I've been thinking," I said, hands resting in my lap, "about who I've become, about what I want." He nodded, not rushing me. I'd spent so many years giving, fixing, maintaining. I don't regret it, but I forgot myself somewhere along the way. His voice was gentle. "You don't have to explain. I see you." I smiled softly. "I know you do. And that's the thing. I'm not used to it anymore." He reached for my hand again, and this time I held it tightly. "I don't want to do anything I'll regret," I said. "But I also don't want to keep pretending I'm fine when I'm not. I deserve something more." Marcus didn't speak. He just looked at me like I was the most important thing he'd ever seen. And then I said the words I hadn't even planned to say. "I'm not leaving, Daniel. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I need to find me again. And I think part of that journey might involve you." His eyes softened. "Then I'll be here, however you need me." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness but from relief. From being heard, understood, accepted. We walked a little longer, hands clasped like two people who'd found something rare. Not a scandal, not a secret. Just a quiet truth neither of us had expected. When I got home, I sat on the porch for a long while, watching the sky fade from blue to lavender. Daniel came out later, a cup of tea in his hand, and handed it to me without a word. We sat together, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. He didn't ask where I'd been. He didn't seem to notice the change in me. But I did, and for the first time in a long time I felt full. Not because someone had filled me up, but because I had remembered how to look inward, how to listen to that quiet voice inside me. The one that whispered, "You still matter." The one that said, "It's not too late." The one that reminded me I was still here, still alive, and still capable of being seen.